My absolute pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest speaker, Professor Nicki Newman. Nicki and I have met at Learning Teaching Student Experience Conference by Chartered ABS in Newport last academic year. And although we haven't spoken directly at the conference, I've attended Nicki's talk and it was really inspiring and interesting. So I reached out to Nicki and invited her to present, to talk about her career journey at the seminars. So Professor Nicki Newman is the School Director of Education at the University of Birmingham Business School and a Professor of Business Education. So over the years of her career, she has undertaken a range of educational leadership roles, and I'm sure Nicki will tell us a bit more about those. And she has led several strategic developments, including a development of a new MSc portfolio at the University of Sheffield Management School. So she has taught a range of undergraduate, postgraduate, and professional programs around marketing and digital marketing specifically. And Nicki is currently working on projects relating to embedding employability skills and also how business school can incorporate AI software in the programs and modules, which is really current and very interesting, isn't it? So Nicki, thank you so much for finding time, for agreeing to talk to us today. And it's over to you. Thank you.
Hey, well, thank you everyone very much for inviting me and Shana for inviting me. It's always nice to come and talk to people, particularly people on teaching pathways or education pathways who are very passionate about kind of education and students and things. And I can see a colleague from Birmingham has just joined, so that's really great. So yes, so my kind of plan is, I'm just going to share my screen. So my plan is, as I say, and I've lost the chat, but never mind. To talk for about 35, 40 minutes, hopefully. I'll try and keep myself to time, although I'm not great at that. And then there'll be plenty of time for questions afterwards. So if I just click through. So what I'm kind of talk about is give a bit of overview of my career history in terms of how I got from outside academia to being a professor of business education, pulling a bit up on my successes and failures in terms of, I guess, kind of my career trajectory, but I'm also happy to talk about any successes and failures I've had in anything that I've done. So if people want to ask about that in the chat or at the end, I'm more than happy with that. And then I want to finish off by my kind of 5 top tips for kind of career progression. And I think these kind of discussions are all very timely. It's normally the time of year people are thinking about promotion and thinking about going for promotion. So these are kind of my 5 top tips in a range for that. But as I say, I'm happy to answer questions on anything really, and obviously work related as we go and kind of go through the sessions. So the first thing I kind of just wanted to say was, I think I gave my inaugural lecture, which I know Sheena came to and a few other people came to. So I gave my lecture last summer. And so as part of that, I kind of had to reflect on my journey. I had to reflect on how I'd got to where I was. So it's a really interesting thing to do. And I think something that kind of struck me as I was doing that was it's not a straight path. There are ups and there are downs, and you go sideways and you go backwards. But eventually, if you keep going, you will go forwards and you will kind of get to that thing. So I think the thing to say is, yeah, for anybody out there, it's not necessarily easy and it's not straight, although it might look like that from what I'm kind of going to present, but it's not actually like that as you do that. So I think that's a kind of thing to note. But generally, even where you kind of have to go a bit sideways or a bit backwards to go forwards, I think you always learn from that. And that always kind of helps you develop and then get to that next stage that you want to get to. And the other thing I'm not going to talk about today very much, although it is in one of my top tips, is the really importance of having the right people, having good people and the right people around you, both inside your kind of career, but also outside. And I'm a big believer of the work-life balance. So I'm very keen that I do not work weekends, only in very exceptional circumstances. I switch off in an evening. So I think it's very important to have that kind of work-life balance as much as we can. And I know it's really hard in the careers that we have chosen. So to have the really, you know, your friends and family around you to support you, but then also having those colleagues who then may become friends later on, supervisors, mentors, they're all really important part of your network and of your support system. So I don't think anybody can take this journey alone. It's always part of a bigger support kind of network. And I'll pick up on that when I come to kind of top tips. So a little bit about me. So life before academia. So academia is my second career. So I worked, so after school, after my A-levels, after school, I worked for what was Lloyds Bank, and that came Lloyds TSB when I worked for them, and has since gone back to work being Lloyds Bank after I left. And I worked for them in total for about 13 years. The last 3 years of that, I decided that I really wanted to leave, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I decided that I would go and get an undergraduate degree, because I thought that might lead me somewhere different. So I did my undergraduate degree as a mature student while working part-time for the bank. So I could self-fund myself through that kind of degree. After that, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I spoke to lots of careers and I went to lots of careers fairs, and all the organizations were like, well, if you start on a graduate scheme, you start back at the beginning. And I was like, oh, I'm too old for that. I don't want to be doing that. So I decided that I really enjoyed being a student. So I went on to do a full-time MBA. I sold my house and used the money that I got out of my house to fund a full-time MBA. With a view to hopefully that would allow me to get up a management position in a different type of organisation to the one I'd worked on before. And it didn't quite happen. As I say, things are never straightforward. That didn't quite happen. I ended up staying at the university where I did my MBA, which was the University of Sheffield, to work as a part-time research assistant and a part-time tutor. And that just happened because one of the lecturers there who I'd been on a module with, basically said, what you're doing after you finish. I have got these posts available. Are you interested? So I was very fortunate for that. So I said, yeah, I don't really know what I want to do. So that sounds good for a year. So I did that. And I think during that time, I kind of got a taste for academia. And I actually thought, this is good. I really enjoy this. This could be something that I want to do with my future. And so I applied to do a PhD at the University of Sheffield. And during my time as a PhD student, which was quite a long time for lots of different reasons, I did a lot of teaching. I taught at the University of Sheffield. I also taught at Sheffield Hallam University. I also taught at an international college that was run by Kaplan. And I also did private tutoring. So I did a lot of teaching during my time as a PhD student. And I came out of my PhD knowing that I love teaching. I love working with students. I love teaching. I wasn't that keen on research. So the thought of actually going into a more traditional at that point, I would say maybe less so now, but at that point, the more traditional route of going down and being a researcher and a teacher or educator, I was like, oh, do I? But at that point, well, during my PhD, that was the only option, or the only option that I could see. And I had a running joke with one of my supervisors that if I got a job in the same institution as her, I'd do her teaching and she could do my research. Because then we both were doing what we like to do. And we passed the other bits on to kind of each other. So that's where I kind of was. Just as I was finishing my PhD, the university where I was doing my PhD actually put out a permanent position for a teaching assistant, which was at a grade 7. So I applied for that. I mean, as I got to the end of my PhD, I did apply for more traditional teaching and research roles at other institutions. I was successful at one of them. So I had a choice. Do I go to this other institution and be a researcher and educator, or do I stay where I was and be an educator? And I clearly chose the latter for, well, the reasons that there was less research in it, and I really enjoyed working at that institution. So I stayed at Sheffield, say as a grade 7, but I did things that were above a grade 7's job descriptor or a grade 7 role descriptor. So I was module leader for a number of modules and some very large modules. And also I became the program director for their largest undergraduate program in business management. And that was because nobody else wanted to do it. And I said, I'd love to do it. Give it me. I think there's some really good things we could do. I would love to do it. So I did that. After a number of years, I went to then become a university teacher, grade 8, so lecturer or assistant professor, depending on the institution you're at. And I was still doing lots of module leadership, but I also then moved to be the undergraduate director for teaching quality enhancement, and passed my PD role on to somebody else. And then again, after a number of more years, I was promoted again to senior university teacher, which is the equivalent of senior lecturer or assistant professor. And while I was in that role, at that grade, I was the departmental director for learning and teaching. So throughout my career at Sheffield, I kind of went through a number of different leadership roles, becoming, I guess, kind of more senior within the particular school that I was in. So I then applied for a job at the University of Birmingham, which I obviously was successful in getting. And I was kind of promoted there. I became a reader of business education, so still grade 9, but at the other end of that scale. And the job I applied for was to be their director of postgraduate programs. And while after I'd been there a little while, I was always also asked to be the College of Social Science lead for postgraduate programs. And then about 3 years later, I was successful in becoming a professor of business education. And at the same time, I moved into being the school director of education, which is where I am now. And that's where I've been for the last kind of 2 years. So again, more senior education roles kind of throughout the school or even at kind of the college level. So I personally have built my career on education leadership. And I'll talk about in a minute the different ways that you can think about building your career. But my particular focus has been on education, say leadership, and I'll talk in a minute about kind of why I kind of chose that kind of path. So I think it's really interesting because if you look at those last 2 slides, you would think my career has been very easy. I mean, it's been great and I've been very lucky and very successful, and I will hold my hand up to that. I've put a lot of hard work in to achieve that, but I've done that. But I think you need to kind of also understand it wasn't completely smooth running over that time. So yeah, I've been promoted 3 times, twice at Sheffield and once at Birmingham. I was also turned down for promotion once. So not every time that I have put in, I have been successful. I was turned down once. Clearly, I went again a little while later, but I was turned down once. I've had a range of leadership roles in both institutions. I've also been unsuccessful, so I've applied to do other leadership roles, both at Sheffield and at Birmingham, and I've been unsuccessful in achieving those roles. So I had kind of a career plan and that didn't quite pan out because I didn't get the roles that I wanted. So I've had to rethink, I think, what other roles could I do? Do I wait for that role to come back again? Do I not? Do I choose something different? And so I've had to rethink that. That's kind of the backwards, forwards, sideways kind of conversations that you have to have with yourself. I was obviously successful when I applied to Birmingham, although when I applied to Birmingham, the role that was advertised was a chair professor role, but they would only appoint me at a reader level because of the CV I had at that time. And I had to make a decision. Do I say, no, thank you, that's not the job I applied for or the level I applied for? Or do I say, yes, thank you very much, I really want to do the job anyway, and I will come and do a good job, and hopefully we'll make the next stage. Obviously, again, I did the latter, and it did work out for me. So yeah, I've also applied for other jobs before I applied to Birmingham, and more recently, and I've been unsuccessful. So again, I have, been very, very fortunate, but I don't always get everything that I apply for or that I would like to do. So I think, I have to realize that you need to be flexible, you need to be patient sometimes, but you do need to have kind of an idea of where you think you would like to take your career. So what type of career do you want? So as I say, my passion has always been with students and student experience, right from the days when I was doing loads and loads of teaching as a PhD student, and experimenting with my teaching and doing lots of different and exciting things with my students to see what worked and what didn't work in terms of their experience and their learning. And I quite early on realized that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to influence that student experience, but I also wanted to be able to influence others and get other people, whether that's at school level or college faculty level, university level, to make changes that I thought were really positive for students. And so that's kind of been my focus as I've been going through, and I've been able to do that by the roles that I've had. And that's why I've been thinking about, what role do I want to do next? What roles do I want to do? Because how can I influence in those roles? I don't want to take a role where I have no influence. So that's why I kind of wanted to think carefully, but also thinking outside of the institutions I'm working in. So I work very heavily with the Academy of Marketing, because marketing is my kind of discipline. So I work very heavily with the Academy of Marketing, and I'm on their education committee, and we look at how we can support marketing education through that committee and the things, and also the special interest group that the Academy of Marketing run for marketing education. So I'm trying to influence that. I'm also trying to influence business more generally. So I've worked with Pearson's when they were first developing their marketing simulation product, and I helped them in that design. I piloted their beta product and fed into the improvements into the final product. So again, so I could really help and shape that product for anybody that wanted to use that product. I obviously do some work with cabs, as Christina said, that's where kind of first got up. So I do work with cabs as well, kind of around business education. So it's also, again, working with those networks, joining the right kind of networks, the right kind of organizations where you can have a place, have a say, and also learn from others, because, I think I've learned a lot from other people about how I do things and what works and what doesn't work. But as I said, there are lots of other career paths. And I think it's really important also to understand your own institution's requirements, because each institution sets up their promotion requirements quite differently. One thing, as a professor, I get asked quite often to review applications from other universities through their promotion processes, and I'm the external reviewer. And so I get to see their promotion criteria, what they require, and they are quite different sometimes. I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't have been promoted if I'd have stayed at the University of Sheffield, because I don't meet their requirements. But I do meet Birmingham's, but I was at Birmingham and I was obviously aiming for their requirements. So understanding your institution's promotion criteria is really important. Most of them require you to do a bit of everything, but most of them also allow you to focus in one area. So you do a little bit of everything, but you have a main focus. And as I say, my main focus was in education leadership, but I know colleagues at Birmingham and other institutions that have developed their career and got to professor based on either their pedagogical research that they've been doing or their external engagement and impact that they have been doing. So there are different ways that you can develop your career, and I think you just have to decide what is right for you. Where is your passion? What do you want to do? Noting that I've done bits of pedagogical research, I've done bits of external engagement, but they weren't my focus of my promotion application. But I still needed to show that I did some bits in those areas. So it's about deciding what's right for you, but also understanding what your institution is looking for. Or if you're looking to go elsewhere, what that institution is looking for in their criteria. So my top tips, kind of what I've learned along the way. Find your area of interest. So do not be a jack of all trades, okay? If you spread yourself too thinly, you never become known in an area for anything. And one thing, particularly as you may move from associate to professor, it is about having that reputation. Both within your institution and externally. So what are you known for? What are your areas? So I think it's about finding. I think if you're at the very beginning of your career, you can have quite a few and you can decide which ones you want to focus on. For me, my area has always been around technology enhanced learning. So that started in my teaching very early on. How can I use technology to improve my teaching, improve my student experience? I was early adopters of lots of things and things that we now use routinely, like online marking or electronic marking. I piloted that at my institution, so I've always been involved in that. Always been very focused on student employability, and also it's a slightly more kind of niche area is kind of the ethics in marketing, which again has come from my teaching in terms of what I teach, but I'm kind of really interested. They have come together quite a lot of the time. So I use technology to help me do employability, to do the ethics. So, I can bring these things together, both in my teaching, but also in the bits of pedagogical research that I've done. And I've been very good. As Rashina said about the beginning, starting to dip my toes into generative AI, although I have others in the school that are doing much more than me, but I'm kind of trying to keep up as much as I can in that area. But that kind of comes back to my underlying interest in technology enhanced learning. So how can we use it to support students' learning as we go through that? So as I say, if you're lucky, they come together and they allow you to do things that cut across those areas. But think about what are your areas, because there's a huge amount of different things you can be interested in. And it doesn't mean that I don't find personal tutoring interesting or transitions interesting or, or assessment and feedback. There's lots of things I'm interested in, but I cannot do everything. So I have to decide where my focus is going to be. So top tip 2, don't be afraid to put yourselves forward for roles, initiative, pilots. As I say, I've piloted things with Pearson's from my marketing experiences. I put myself forward for roles that on the face of it were above my pay grade, but I put myself forward because I was very passionate about it, and for some of those I was lucky to be given those roles. So sometimes you won't, sometimes you'll put yourself forward and you're not successful, but do put yourself forward for things. If you're taking risks, take calculated risks. So when I have done what at the time seemed risky things in my teaching, like introducing a product that was a beta product that had never been used before, and I introduced that into my module, I had to think, okay, if this broke down and didn't work, what would be the consequences on the module? What would be the consequences for the students? And so I also had to have a backup plan if it didn't work, because we didn't know if the product would work. So think about those things. So I say take calculated risks, but don't be afraid to take those risks, okay? Because they're the things that will make you innovative. They are the things that can build your name. So I think, but talk it through with colleagues, talk it through with mentors, and find kind of like-minded people that, you know, will support you in doing those things. So build your networks, collaboration, find your people. We all have very busy day jobs. And the more senior you become and the more of these roles you take, the busier your day seems to get. So finding a group of people. When I was very start of my career, a lot of my projects I did on my own. So I did my projects around using simulations in teaching on my own. I did a project around flipped teaching nearly 20 years ago on my own. I can't do that anymore because the time is not there for me anymore. So now everything I do with my networks, those kinds of things. So whether it's the Academy Marketing kind of networks that I have or the CABS network that I have. So I have different groups of colleagues from my institution and other institutions that I work with on different types of projects. And that makes it much easier for me to do, but it's also more fun. It does, you know, to work with those people and to find those people. So, you know, build your networks, build your collaborations, particularly around pedagogical research, and find those like-minded people that you want to work with that makes it an enjoyable kind of experience. Also, as you get into certain kind of leadership roles, there are some really good networks out there to support you. So again, whether it's the CABS, the bottom diagram here is just the Russell Group. So I find being part of the Russell Group Business Schools Heads of Education Network so useful. I get to bounce ideas off them. I get to learn that everyone is suffering the same way as I'm suffering in certain things. So it's a really good network for support, but for ideas, inspiration. So again, finding those networks is really important. Top tip 4, find mentors. And there may be people that start as a mentor and then become a collaborator or vice versa. But I think mentors have been so vital in my career, absolutely vital in my career, whether that's going from my PhD supervisors or whether it's been the deans of the schools I've been working in or people that were in my role now when I was much earlier in my career. They've been absolutely vital to me. I would say all of these people on the screen have been my mentors, and I would like to say all of them are my friends. Even though I don't work with a lot of them anymore, they've either moved to other institutions or I moved to other institutions, but they are really important. They give you confidence. Without these people, I wouldn't have applied for promotion. I wouldn't have applied for new jobs. They give you the confidence. They give you the support. They're a great sounding board. And I would say to people as you are becoming more senior, it's really important that then you pay that back. So it's one thing I'm very conscious of is to provide mentorship to other people. And it's a really good part of my job. It's one of the best part of my jobs. And so I think, you know, it's really important to do that. And then finally, top tip 5, don't give up. Keep trying. I found this quote quite recently. If plan A doesn't work, don't worry. The alphabet has 25 more letters. Hopefully you won't need 25. Hopefully you'll only need a B or a C. But I think it's really interesting because, as I say, I acknowledge I've had a very successful and very fortunate career so far, but it hasn't always been easy. As I've been knocked back, things haven't worked. But you just have to think, okay, that didn't work. What else can I try? Where else can I look? What else should I do? Why didn't that work? Try and not make the same mistakes again. So I think, you know, as I say, something better will come along. I'm a big believer kind of in fate, or it wasn't meant to be. And so something better will come along. So just before I got the job at Birmingham, I'd applied for a job at another institution that I really wanted and I didn't get, and I was heartbroken. And then Birmingham came along. So clearly that first one wasn't meant to be because Birmingham was coming along. So I think, you know, you have to kind of realize, okay, that wasn't meant to be for whatever reason, but something better will come along eventually. You just have to be a little bit patient in that respect. And that's me done. I did half an hour. I kept to kind of half an hour, kind of 40 minutes. But as I say, I'm more than happy. I think these kind of sessions are probably best for people to ask questions, and I'm happy to be interrogated in any way people want to do that, and talk about anything that people are particularly interested in. I will stop sharing and then I will go to see people as well.
Excellent, Nicki. Thank you so much. Very highly practical and useful and inspiring, because it's very authentic and genuine. I found it very helpful. Thank you also for sharing and normalizing, talking about being rejected, because that's a big part of the journey, I think, isn't it? So thank you so much.